Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel on YouTube. This is Tom O'Connor from breezy, windy, rainy. I wish I was in southern Florida right now, New Orleans, where we're getting the very bottom of whatever that. I shouldn't complain because apparently it's like snowing in Chicago and Minneapolis and all places north of here.
That sounds miserable.
And a little disclaimer right off the bat: denim shirt, and if you see little something's in my beard, it's not my breakfast. I'm in the middle of moving from one apartment to another, and we've been painting, and apparently I was using my beard to do the trim at some point.
I've heard that works well.
I just realized that beforehand. So as always, Rocky Messing, as Browning Marian used to say, my partner in mischief, still in Tel Aviv. Browning?
Still in Tel Aviv. I'm here for an extended trip home, which is nice. So
good.
Be here
Good. So what? We'll see you Legal Tech New York, whenever the heck that is.
I think Legal Tech in March is the next trip that I've got planned. So
okay,
very good. It's good to be home, and generally it's good to be in a desert climate during the winter.
Yes, indeed. I would welcome that right now.
Yeah, it's better to be here where it's 70. So
yeah, please. That's it. That's it. No more weather.
Yeah,
I'm done.
We're done. Good. Now on to sports.
We are really happy today to be joined by an old friend and associate of ours, Bill Hamilton, who is, and correct me if I get these wrong, Bill, Senior Legal Skills Professor, as well as Director of the eDiscovery Project at the Levin College of Law at the University of Florida.
That's correct.
All right, I got it right. Proving once again that I can at least read, right? Bill is well known to, I'm sure, many, if not all of you, as a longtime educator in our field. He's had a number of different efforts, and most recently, we were just reminded by an unknown publicist in the wings that we are coming up on the 10th anniversary of your eDiscovery Conference at the University of Florida, which, as I recall, will be March 23rd and 24th of next year. Is that correct, Bill?
Oh, actually, we've adjusted the schedule for this coming year because COVID shifted a lot of different dates.
Yeah.
And we had a kind of a demand that we move the conference up earlier. So it's going to be February 8th and 9th this coming year, February 8th and 9th. And,
I should know that because we were trying to schedule something. I was trying to schedule something with somebody yesterday. I think it was Kaylee trying to schedule one of our webinars. And several of the people said, oh, no, we can't do the 8th because we're going to be in Florida with Bill. So, oh, great. I'm glad I brought that up. So the corrected date is February 8th and 9th.
Correct.
At the Levin College of Law, University of Florida. This will, as always, Bill, I presume, be both live and streamed live over the internet?
Yes, it's going to be in person. We're going to have approximately 150 people in person. Right. And then what we did is COVID played a little, I don't want to say trick on us, but we learned something from COVID through all the trials and tribulations, that there's a large audience out there that really demands and needs eDiscovery education. So although we had to go to a totally virtual conference this past year, not this year, but the prior year, the online attendance jumped dramatically. We also made it free for everybody online as well. So we had over 3,000 people online for last year's conference. So the way we're kind of looking at it now, and it's funny how events change your perspective. We're having, obviously, it's going to be wonderful in person. We're going to have all kinds of interesting people, including yourself, Tom, will be coming to the conference. And we'll have our normal event intermingling with students and professionals and workers and our 30 faculty members from around the nation. But that audience is really a backdrop for the larger audience, which is our online audience, which is 3,000. And just to enhance that experience this year, what we're working with is an online platform called Whova. We're still going to have Zoom. It's going to be a Zoom presentation, so people will come on with a Zoom link. But Whova is going to provide a background platform for us that's really going to enhance the user's experience in terms of Q&A, in terms of groups, in terms of internal messaging. It's really going to be exciting. So we've kind of taken one of the, I think, principal lessons we learned from COVID and kind of put that on steroids and really enhancing and making this not only a conference for in-person people where the online folks are kind of hanging on, but a conference that's really focused on the online audience, perhaps even more so than the in-person audience.
Excellent.
That's
Excellent.
awesome. And I think that we need to dig in a little bit more into the conference and the genesis of the conference and kind of some stuff like that. But I'd love to start a little bit earlier, if that's okay, Bill. Let's start as a young boy. Did you always know that you wanted to go into law? Like, was that something that you like envisioned as a kid? Hey, I'm going to be a lawyer, or was that something that came a little bit later?
Well, no, it was quite the opposite. My father was always kind of egging me on to be a lawyer because he was an engineer and I was kind of in an engineering curriculum. So I at high school and initially at college. So I never wanted to be a lawyer. In fact, it was the opposite. I was in a rebellion against my father. So I was never going to do anything that he wanted me to do. So no, I was not interested in law. Went away initially to be an engineer. And then when I got to college, it was during a very exciting time. It was in the late 60s when there were the anti-war protests, the civil rights movements. The nation was just bubbling with excitement. I became very interested in politics and social policy back then. And I switched my major from being an engineer to philosophy, actually, and graduated with a philosophy degree.
I'm sorry, where was that, Bill?
That was at Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Sure, yep.
Cool. Awesome. So, okay, so you switch over to philosophy and did I'm sure your dad, who sounds like he was a practical engineer, loved the concept of philosophy as a career.
I'm laughing because my son Seamus was also, he was a great mathematician. He actually had a whole bunch of those college prep stuff doing math that I could never even understand in high school. And his sophomore year switched to being a philosophy major.
Right.
And then soon found out that
all the great ones do.
Yeah, the philosophy help wanted section of the want ads every Sunday in the paper was a little thin. And now here he is working for Joy Morrow, you know.
Right.
Yeah. We all end up in the law somewhere. Just when we thought I was out,
Yep.
pulls me back in.
So
What drove that, Bill? How'd you get now philosophy major, Lehigh University, then law school?
Yeah, well, it's a gap there. I didn't go to law school till I was 30.
Oh,
So I had this kind of glorious 20s, if you will, for lack of a better expression. So after I graduated from college from Lehigh, I ended up moving to Florida, which is where my wife was from. So I married in Florida right out of college. And then, of course, as you said, Tom, what do you do? So I basically started picking up jobs. I got a job working at a rehabilitation center for people with Down syndrome, did that for a year. Then I got another job working with a government program called CETA, I think it was.
Oh, yeah.
Provided money for impacted areas. And of course, I was living in an impact zone. I was so poor.
Right.
So they hired me to do various community relations things. And then I had this really exciting job I picked up with the Justice Department, where I was monitoring school desegregation in the Florida Panhandle. This is 1970, believe it or not, 1970, 71. So I was up there and living in Tallahassee, but covering the entire Panhandle, where there were various kinds of demonstrations and things going on related to school desegregation, voting, access to the ballot, things of that nature. And managed not to get myself in too much trouble up there, although just a little bit now and then.
Right. It's I'm a new party. I'm staying back, but I can imagine.
Well, actually, there's this fun story that I was. There was this march from into Quincy, Florida, which is a city nearby Tallahassee, and I was basically the federal observer. So I'm marching along with the marchers, really walking along with the marchers, because I wasn't in the march itself because I had an official role to play. But I was just a young kid. I'm 22 years old. This was kind of crazy. And so all of a sudden there's this disturbance and the police come out, and with shotguns and everything. When we got into this march, got into the city of Quincy. So to make a long story short, I ended up getting arrested and taken into the local jail for a while until they checked up my credentials as a federal employee. But so there were some rough, not easy moments there. I mean, these were contentious times, and I think we're getting a sense of what contentious times can look like. People, when they're riled, do crazy things, as we all saw on January 6th. So when you're dealing with deep-seated issues, it can be tough, and it was kind of tough there. But it was a great job, and I enjoyed it. After that, I decided to go back and study philosophy, though, as a graduate student. Ended up going to Washington.
A little calmer, no rioting.
Ended up getting a master's degree in philosophy from Washington University. And then I was going to pursue, become a teacher like your son, Tom, and get a PhD. And it wasn't for me. It didn't fit my personality getting a PhD, because it was kind of writing alone in the office, doing library work and banging out a 150-page document. And, it just wasn't getting there. So I was at the University of Florida at this point in the philosophy department doing graduate work. So when I was 30, I ended up, and of course, before that, I had taught high school and done some other stuff. But so I ended up going to law school at Florida, and it was like heaven for me. I really had discovered what I was looking for all my life, because it was intellectually challenging. It was a social activity in the sense that law is a collective process that we do. And there was reality testing in the sense that, the judge is going to tell you whether you win or not on your particular motions, or the jury is going to tell you whether you lose or not your trial. So it had a lot of the elements of my distorted personality that came together. And I really loved practicing law in the big firm environment, which I did down in Miami for the next 20 years.
Wow.
Cool. And what kind of law were you practicing?
I was a commercial
litigation,
litigator, big firm commercial litigator, defending class actions, defending contract disputes, defending intellectual property breaches. And the intellectual property stuff was great, because you're kind of on the plaintiff side on that, even though you're representing large corporations. They're trying typically to protect their trademarks and service marks and patents. And so you're on the plaintiff side. So that was a lot of fun. And I did a couple of big plaintiffs cases as well, but mostly work was defense work of the commercial litigation, big case type.
Right. And had you
and is that
were you in the cutting end of eDiscovery then? Had eDiscovery reared its ugly head yet, or?
Yeah, well, not yet. I mean, the great thing about it is, and one thing that's wonderful about the practice of law, and I think that students and people getting into law should be in tune to, as you have been, Tom, and you also, Rachi, is that things are happening, and you watch the world and you pay attention to what's happening, and then you do things. So what was really fun is, believe it or not, when I first started practicing law, there weren't computers on the attorney's desks. I mean, it's hard to imagine, right, Tom? And in fact,
I remember
it wasn't until the mid-90s that computers came on the attorney's desks. And then what happened was I had a client that had an intellectual property problem. Someone was copying his protected copyrighted material. So I said, well, let me see it. So he said to me, well, I'll put it on my bulletin board. And I said, what do you mean your bulletin board? I mean, my idea of a bulletin board is what I had when I was at home. And in high school, I put things on the bulletin board with pins, in my bedroom. So he said, no, it's the internet. It's online somewhere. What's that? So this is, mid-early 90s. So I ended up all of a sudden finding this world, which was really exciting to me back then. I can remember at home one night at 2:00 in the morning, I had hooked up to this internet service provider. I think it was called Delphi out of New England. I think.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I downloaded the suite. This was before browsers and things like that. So you had different applications to do different things on the internet with different protocols. And I was looking at it, and I said, "What is this all about?" And it dawned on me this was a communication tool instead of a productivity tool, which changed everything for me. And I said, well, maybe I can find some of my old friends. So I said, well, there's this guy I know at some university somewhere in the US that I was in graduate school with in Florida. Maybe I can find him. So I typed in his name. This is like at 2 o'clock in the morning. And the message came up, where do you want to look for him? Do you want to look for him in Florida? That was one option. Do you want to look for him in the United States? I'm there, wow. And then the next option was, or do you want to look for him in the world? I said, unbelievable. I can look in the world for somebody that I know. So I can remember that the kind of proverbial hairs popping up on the back of your neck and back. And so that introduced me to the internet. So I was really excited about that, started doing various kinds of things with it. I built Holland and Knight's first internet site, its first website, its first extranet with clients and intranet. And I was all doing that in the 90s and having a great time with it. And then I had some clients, telephone companies, that were having big problems with people complaining about a certain kind of service. We don't need to get into the detail, but it was a giant class action. And what we had to do was kind of prove negatives. We had to prove that this wasn't a problem. We had to prove this wasn't a problem. So how do you do that? How do you go about proving that? Well, we had to go to the customer service records. Now we're talking about customer service records for millions of people over years. And how do we dig into that to prove that something isn't there? Well, it's the e-discovery problem, what we call an e-discovery problem now. Back then, we didn't have a name for it. So what I did was we collected all this electronically stored information and basically then did a sampling exercise of it using various statistical analyses. Of course, there was no one to talk to about sampling, but kind of like your son, Tom, my wife was a mathematics major. So I went home and said to her, Cindy, how can I figure out what samples to use that will be persuasive to the other side that
Go
will
to the
give them
expert.
confidence that there's no problem here in this litigation? And so we basically took these tranches and did sampling, and I had attorneys looking at the samples, and the case went away, and I was a hero with a client. I said, hey, this is wonderful. I can make a lot of money doing this. I can win cases. I can send my children to college.
Amaze friends, influence people.
This is wonderful. Real litigators do electronic discovery, and it wins cases for them. And so that's kind of how I got involved in it. And then,
what year was that, Bill?
Oh, that was approximately 1996, 97, 98, if I'm thinking properly.
Okay.
I think we actually were using the old concordance to do some of the work with way back when.
Right.
And then, of course, Zubilay comes about, and I'm kind of winning cases, and my partners are watching me, and things are happening because I'm finding all this evidence that people didn't know about existed. And then Zubilay comes about, and they all got scared because they said, oh my gosh, if we don't know this, we're going to get sanctioned for spoliation. So I built with a partner of mine who was in the electronic discovery in the Washington office. We built a program, and in 2004-ish, 2005, we rolled this out for the entire law firm. And we taught it across all the offices at Holland and Knight, which had become a national practice by then. And it was a great success. And of course, as you guys know, what's the one thing, Tom, you have to do to get any attorney to come to a meeting? Well, you have to
either offer lunch or CLE.
Right.
So we offered lunch. So we had this kind of, weekly luncheon series where we would bribe them to come learn what they needed to learn to be great attorneys. And they got lunch on top of it. So the firm was big enough to sponsor and support all that across the nation. So then the next step was really interesting because what's happening is I'm thinking to myself, meanwhile, I had moved from Miami to Tampa for personal family reasons. So I'm in the Tampa office now. And the neat thing about Tampa is it's a little closer to Gainesville for some of you that know the geography. Miami is light years away from Gainesville. Tampa is just a 2-hour drive. So after I finished teaching this course to all the attorneys at Holland and Knight, I said, if law students don't know this stuff, they're going to get slaughtered out in the field when they go out and try and practice. Because a lot of our students go work for big firms. Of course, at that stage, not many big firms knew what they were doing, but the little firms, the middle-sized firms had no idea for the most part, unless it was a boutique of some kind. So I went to the dean and I said to the dean of the University of Florida, why don't you let me teach this course I've developed for Holland Knight let me teach it as an adjunct for the University of Florida. And I'll drive the 2 hours back and forth to teach this course at the University of Florida. So the dean looked at me like I was a complete lunatic. And but fortunately, Holland and Knight had lots of contacts with the law school, and he called up some of my colleagues who were very influential in the state of Florida at the time in the legal community. He said, "Oh yeah, Hamilton's great. You should do this." And so I arrived on campus and started teaching it, and it was a gigantic success. The students, it was very popular. The students liked it a lot and just flocked to it. So I started teaching it, and actually I've taught eDiscovery every semester at the University of Florida since 2007.
Wow. And so did the dean even know at the time what eDiscovery was?
No clue.
Was it, so it was really, you had to start from scratch and like, remember this, the 2 hours that you spend on discovery in 3 years of law school? Well, we're going to make it a whole big thing. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, have to keep in mind what law schools think of themselves as kind of a twofold thing. One, the professors here, the tenured professors, the professors that have made a career out of it, these are wonderful people that are contributing to the development of the law, mostly through scholarship. Now, they also teach, but the idea historically about teaching law students was to teach them how to think as lawyers. Mm-hmm. And then what we'll do is we'll have the practical skills to learn when they go and apprentice themselves, for lack of a better expression, as associates or whatever at law firms. eDiscovery turned that model upside down because they weren't going to learn this out in law firms because the law firms didn't know it. So right. for years and years and years, and it's still happening. I have law students coming back from working as clerks during a summer, much less as associates, saying to me, "You're not going to believe it, Professor Hamilton. I know more about eDiscovery than anybody at the firm that I went and worked with." So it kind of turned that model upside down, and there's a shift that's going on in law schools in general, where we still have that principal mission to teach students how to think, and we have this principal mission of scholarship to advance the law, but we're also beginning to think more and more about the skill sets that we need to inculcate in students so they can hit the ground running with a little more dexterity and a little more capability than we had, maybe 40 or so years ago when Tom and
and learning that eDiscovery is not just document review, because a lot of firms still think that that is the definition.
Well, that was a big challenge. I mean, I couldn't say to students, keep in mind, here's Hamilton coming in, and I'm still practicing while I'm doing this I didn't become a regular full-time professor until 2017 when I retired from the practice of law. So here's Hamilton coming in, and I'm practicing law and having great things and great success using these skills, which are really new skills that in terms of understanding electronically stored information, understanding metadata, how putting the stories together that win cases for you. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to persuade the students that this is a skill set that's really critical for you, not because you're going to become a geek or an eDiscovery specialist or someone that's going to be doing this, but because you need this skill as a competent litigator. Of course, if I had told them that what I want to do is train you to do document review, I wouldn't have had a single student come to class. It's as simple as that. I mean, no one goes to law school to try and think I'm going to have a career as a document reviewer. I mean, some people do that. It fits your careers perfectly, but that's not the kind of students that typically come to preeminent law schools. So it's been a little bit of a challenge to say, wait, you've got a misunderstanding here. You're doing this like I did, to win cases, to advance your client's goals, to be successful in your career, and to do good in the process.
Right. And nowadays, you can't tell the story without eDiscovery, without understanding what's going on within a corporation's data. So, really driving that home that the data is where everything, where the case lives, is something that should be obvious. But U of F is one of the few still out there that is teaching this and that is promoting eDiscovery as a skill that an attorney absolutely has to have. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that a lot of the other, I mean, there are some schools out there that have now courses on e-discovery, but the vast majority still do not. Any thoughts on what's setting, I mean, besides Bill Hamilton being in the right place in the right time to push it forward?
Yeah. Well, it's not a subject matter, obviously, that is going to work in large part for scholarship and career scholars doing work at the law school, which is one of the principal, if not the principal mission of the law school, in addition to teaching young students how to think like lawyers. So finding the right people is very difficult. And it's tough to find someone like myself that can be a regular adjunct on a regular basis. It's tough to find somebody like myself that knows a lot about e-discovery, has an exciting professional career, and then can come and transition to becoming a professor at a law school. There's just not a lot of people like me that have my peculiar circumstances that make it possible. So what law schools have done, in large part, is they've used adjuncts. And the danger, of course, in using adjuncts, these are wonderful people that do great things. And I was an adjunct for 10 years. But, I got to tell you that working as an adjunct and you've got a full-time practice is not the easiest thing in the world. Mm-hmm. And and then adjuncts typically will come in and teach for a semester, then maybe come back 2 years later, teach another semester. So there's not a continuity that the law school is able to generate, and not a program that we have here at the University of Florida, which is our e-discovery program, which fortunately there's been funding, of course, here at the University of Florida for that, which has enabled me to do everything that I've done.
And speaking of everything that you've done, so we'll get to the conference in a minute. I want a lot of people who've seen some of your shtick, your when you go out there, one of the most popular things that classes or short courses that you've done is your course on statistics and sampling. Can you describe it a little bit and talk a little bit about how you came up with the idea of making?
Yeah, we should have asked you to bring a couple of your building blocks.
Yeah, I've got them right here beside me. That's not a problem.
Oh, well, show the crowd.
Keep them in the office.
Yeah.
Well, these are great. These are the boxes I use, and I've got like 60 of them. And we have some are yellow and some are green. And then what we have is the whole group is what we want to basically determine what's relevant and what's not relevant. So the idea here behind it all is, how do we talk about electronic discovery to one another? I'm a trench guy. I fought battles in electronic discovery all the time with the opposition. And the big question was always, how do I know how well you're doing? How can I tell if you're really turning over the information to me? And what I tell my students, and how I felt about it when I was a practicing litigator, was your information that you've got, that belongs to me, the relevant stuff. That's mine. I should get it pursuant to the rules. Now, I've got to make sure you're giving it to me, though. So I have to be able to understand what you're doing. I just can't accept willy-nilly that you've given me all the stuff that I'm entitled to, all the documents, especially in the e-discovery era, when people don't frequently know where the information is located. They don't know how to search for it. They don't know how to collect it, So what I did is I said, how can I make this visible to students? And I came up with the idea of the boxes, because students learn in different ways. And one of the issues we have in law school that we do struggle with all the time is, how can we be as concrete as possible with the students? We tend to talk a lot, but we want to show. So, I think the nice thing about the boxes is it's a little bit of show and tell. So we get the idea across with a visual graphic demonstration. And then you have these aha moments, which are really rewarding for, for somebody making a presentation, teaching, or trying to help people understand particular concepts. And then, of course, I don't do it because I just want them to have the aha moment. I want them to be able to take this back to their firms. And when they're talking to the opposition, say, well, let's talk about precision. Let's talk a little bit about recall. How do you know how well you're doing? Did you test this out a little bit? Did you run some sampling? And, then they can talk intelligently about it. So that's kind of the idea. Is how do we create a language of electronic discovery that allows us to communicate the key concepts and thoughts that make the process run? Because information the oil, if you will. It's the lubricant of the litigation process. You could almost argue that litigation's a battle over information. So, I want to know where the enemy is and what they have.
Absolutely.
Well,
Have you
and the other thing is, as a teaching tool, I've seen you do the presentation a couple of times, but at Relativity Fest several weeks ago, it was the first time I was sitting on the stage, on the podium, watching the audience and watching the audience reaction. And so as you were, uncovering the larger group with the different colors and talking about what about these and what about that, you could see literally the lights going on over people's heads. I mean, let's face it, most lawyers didn't go to law school because they're good at math, and then you start talking about things like precision and recall, that is disconcerting to them, and they have a hard time, I think, visualizing it. But what your process does, what your example does with the blocks, is give them a visualization so they can go, oh, okay, if you're talking to folks like Craig Ball or Maura Grossman, they get it, okay? They gravitate to the math side of things and they understand, and that's not a big deal. But the average, like you said, the average lawyer in the trenches, that's kind of a, what?
Right, they need the concrete example.
Yeah, yeah.
Forward.
And so
So I want to know if you patented the course and you're now going to be making money. Anyone who then uses the statistical sampling in theirs, you get a portion of whatever their fees are. Is that how it works?
No, we're a public institution. I love other people to take what I've done and use it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying.
So was the University of Illinois when Napster started, but it's funny. I have a cousin who's a lawyer in South Carolina, but he doesn't really practice. He and his wife have a company that does publications for teachers' aides. It's called Super Duper Publications, and he's made a fortune. The same way, providing teaching aids to help people show a visual experience of what you're trying to describe to them. I just think it's simple, but it's brilliant, because again, like I said, I sat there and watched these people in the audience going, oh, all right, I've been hearing about this precision and recall for a couple of years now. I got no idea what that means. Now I get it. It's the green blocks and the blue blocks.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so as part of the public service and wanting to put forward education and bring people closer to what e-discovery really is, as mentioned earlier, this year is going to be the 10th e-discovery University of Florida e-discovery conference. How'd that start? So there you are, you're an adjunct professor, you're still practicing at the firm. And what happened? You were like, oh, we should throw a conference. What was the genesis of that?
Strangely enough, what you just said is kind of what happened.
Really?
I said to myself, we really got to get the message out. Not only do we have students here, but we have our graduates that are out there practicing law. And what about a graduate that just graduated 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, or those that are like me that graduated decades ago? They're out there struggling. So what we need to do is need to have an outreach program. So the conference was originally designed to be an outreach program, targeting in significant part University of Florida Law School graduates. So we said we'll do a conference in person, but we'll also broadcast it online. And it was an unbelievably novel idea back then that a university would have a conference. In fact, it was a novel idea for any conference to broadcast itself online back 10 years ago. And we pioneered that idea. And I've had great people to work with here at the University of Florida Levin College of Law, the staff and my colleagues. I've had great people to help me plan the conference and work with the conference. I have a wonderful planning committee every year. Maribel Rivera has devoted significant chunks of her time and her life to making this conference be what it is. So she's a star and a jewel. And, over the 10 years, we've just continued to do one new and exciting thing after another. But the fundamental idea of the conference was always basically what we're going to do is we're going to reach out to people. And so when they come to the conference, we're going to target middle audiences. And when they come to the conference, they're going to walk away from each panel or each hour with 3 things they can take home and use at the office the next day. We're not going to talk about e-discovery so much as we're going to show them how to do e-discovery. So when you come to our conferences, you leave with skills that you can take and use the next day. And it really is designed for the mid-level conference. And I want to thank George Socia while we're talking about thanking people. Initially, the conference was the UF Law EDRM conference. We teamed up with George and EDRM to put this conference on, and that we carried that name for a number of years until EDRM went on its own separate life, which is great, and they're doing wonderful things now. But at that point, we just made it the UF Law EDiscovery Conference. And Tom, I was going to say this, but I want to thank you, Tom, again. You were there at the very beginning. Tom's book, which he has a new edition out of, E-Discovery for the Small and Medium Case, was part of my inspiration for doing the conference. I read Tom's book and I said, this is exactly what we need, because I wasn't so much worried about the big law firms at the time, although I should have been. I was more worried about the mid-level law firms and the small firms. And Tom had just written a book, which was called back then, E-Discovery for the Small and Medium Case. And Tom came to our first conference and was one of our opening panel to talk about the mission of the conference and what we're trying to do. We've continued that orientation. Now, we have panels that do talk about predictive coding and advanced analytics and things about that. But the center of gravity of the conference has always been the mid-level practitioner. And frankly, the mid-level practitioner is a practitioner that goes way up to the top law firms.
That's very true.
In terms of e-discovery skill sets.
Do you have any specific story, memory, something like that, like stands out from the last 10 years? Anything that you'd be able to share?
Well, we had a lot of fun with e-discovery story booths for a number of years. What we did is we had Dave Horrigan and Tom and others, and we said to ourselves, we need to kind of preserve this information that's being generated. And just like you're talking to me, we need to talk to our conference panelists that have flown in when they're not presenting. I mean, they're in the audience participating with the discussions, but why don't we have 5, 10, 15 minutes with them separately? So we had our e-discovery story booth, which the idea kind of stole from NPR. There's the old NPR story booth. Or I forget what they call it exactly, but they were having interviews with, 2 people talking about their life experiences. It was kind of done on a Friday back then. And so I said, why don't we adopt that idea and basically have someone interview our participants? So we had a blast interviewing all the participants, all our presenters, and then putting that on YouTube. So we have this giant YouTube channel. We have all the old interviews, recent interviews of our presenters and panelists. So we had a lot of fun with that. We've had a lot of fun, with expanding the presentation. Last year, when we did COVID, it was great. Nobody was on campus for it, but all the faculty, or most of the faculty, presenter faculty, flew in, and we had this giant room with just mirrors and screens on it that we were presenting to. Us we built it out like a regular TV audience or TV studio. And I want to again thank the great support that the conference and I've gotten from the University of Florida Levin College of Law, and the staff here, especially the IT staff's been great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so Tom, any questions before we start wrapping things up?
I mean, I got a million. We could talk all day on this, but no, we are coming up against the hard stop here. So, Rocky, go ahead.
Okay, so Bill, I'm going to ask a couple of very quick, 1 sentence or so kind of answer questions for you. Okay. First one, nice and easy. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book is Sophie's Choice.
Sophie's Choice.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Awesome. Gives you a lot to think about.
It's my
Yeah.
favorite book only in the sense that it is a penetrating, revealing disclosure of what it means to be human. When I finished reading Sophie's Choice, I think I cried for 2 hours. It was just an amazing, amazing experience that Styron created in Sophie's Choice. The movie's good, but the book is literally overwhelming.
Yep. And I think I might know the answer to this one, but let's see. Favorite sport?
Baseball.
Baseball.
I played a lot of baseball. Now, what you should ask me is, what's your favorite position on the baseball field?
Ah, okay, yep. And
Okay.
that would be?
I was a catcher.
Ooh,
You're a catcher.
Yeah, and
Nice.
the tools of ignorance, right?
no, it's exactly the tools of ignorance, but it's exactly the opposite. Who's running the show? It's the catcher running the show out of the
Yeah,
ball field.
exactly.
Because the catcher's the only player that's facing everybody else and can
Right.
see the whole show that's going on.
And,
I'm
yeah.
calling the pitches. I had an associate once that was a former pitcher for Tulane. So if something went wrong in a case and he kind of went on his own way and didn't follow my instructions exactly. So I said to him, John, let's understand this. I'm the catcher, you're the pitcher. I call the pitches and I put my glove up and you throw the pitch where I want it. Now, do we have our understanding?
Right, exactly.
So yeah,
Exactly.
so
How
think
the
baseball's a
practice
great
of
sport.
law is like baseball. Yeah, awesome. Okay, two more. If you could live anywhere in the world besides Florida, where would it be and why?
It would be in southern France because it's so beautiful. Aix-en-Provence is the city of my dreams. The colors are spectacular. Cézanne painted there, I believe, and many of the Impressionists. And it's just a stunning visual, culinary, and cultural experience. I'm kind of a Francophile.
Awesome. Yes.
My specialty
Agreed,
was French
100%.
philosophy. So
Okay. Last piece as a put on your philosophical hat. If you could go back in time and give your younger self one quick piece of advice, what time period would that be, and what would you tell yourself?
go back and give myself advice as to what direction I was taking. I've been lucky because my intuitions have taken me in the right direction for the most part. So I have a lot of students that are struggling with what should their career options be? What should they do? And, my advice to them is try and find out the things of your personality that click for you. In other words, as with baseball, I'm a team player. So it made a lot of sense for me to work in a big firm because that's a team environment. I like to keep score. So it made sense for me to work in an environment where you keep score, namely, who's winning or losing the various motions. And as you can tell, also I'm intellectually charged. So I love doing legal research and writing short papers when I was beginning my career, because I felt I could get intellectual closure on the underlying themes. So my advice to students has always been find those aspects of your personality that work for you, and then try and match them up to your career. And the way to do that is find someone you like who's practicing law or practicing a profession. Find someone you like, period. And then find out if they like their job. And then you've got a good chance that you're going to like that job too, if you're like them. So I think you just got to follow what you like and your intuitions in life, and let all the other stuff take care of itself, and it will. Let the money take care of itself. Let the prestige take care of itself. Let the power take care of itself. If you're happy and thriving, you'll make the world happy around you, and the world will reward you.
Excellent.
Great.
So now I turn it over to Tom.
Okay, Bill, I've got one short question as well. Beatles or Stones?
Beatles.
Okay. Yeah, Rocky and I have, this has been a bone of contention for quite some time.
The reason the Beatles is for many, many things, but The Beatles did a song back during 1968, 1969, when all hell was breaking loose in the United States in terms of protest movements and the like. We were getting very frustrated, those of us that were in the anti-war movement, because the war continued and continued and continued and continued. And all the protests and demonstrations didn't seem to be going home and working. And then there were some factions that were developing, were leaning towards violence. And Tom, you'll remember the Weathermen and some other groups.
Oh, yeah.
Right about that time, the Beatles came out with a song called Let It Be. And amazingly, that song was incredibly meaningful for me, and that life will take care of itself somehow. And it was very important for the anti-war movement in general. So I'm always thankful that the Beatles did that song when they did, because it saved a lot of people. And I think it really was good for the country.
Great. And our final question that we ask everybody at the end of the show is if you could spend a day with anybody from our profession, and that they could be living or dead, who would that person be, and what would you do with them for the day?
Well, I think what I would do is I would take my planning committee for the conference. And what I would do is I would just sit down with them and think about how we can do this even better. Working with groups, and of course, is wonderful for me. I'm kind of a team player, as you can tell. There's a great line from the movie Any Given Sunday, in which at the very end of it, I think it's Pacino is talking to the star player, and he says to him, I was talking to an old football player, and he said, I asked him what he missed about playing football, and he said, I don't miss the women. I don't miss the drugs. I don't miss the crowd cheering. What I miss is lining up on the field and marching down the field as a team with those 11 guys, 10 other guys. That's what I really miss. And that's what excites me. And so I don't want to go backwards and visit with anyone. I want to go ahead with my planning committee and others and keep inventing the world going forward. That's what makes me excited and makes me smile.
Great.
That's awesome.
Great answer.
Love that.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, thank you very much for your time. Always a pleasure chatting with you. I'll remind everybody again, the 10-year anniversary of your eDiscovery Conference at the Levin College of Law at the University of Florida will be February 8th and 9th of 2023. Hope to see everybody there, and hope we can continue our conversations in greater depth when we're on campus, as we always do, and we all start talking together. So
Yeah.
Thanks once again, Bill. Really a pleasure having you with us.
My pleasure. I enjoyed
Thanks
it.
so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys. And thanks for listening in, folks. We'll see you next time on the eDiscovery channel.